We supply chain people, 22 is done. It's done very much in March. 23 in a large portion is also already done. Supply chain is about getting ahead of yourself. Making decisions with 100% information, computer can do that. Yeah. They don't need me. 100% they don't need me. Making decisions with 60% of the data that is required to make that decision. This is where experience, a lot of failures, a lot of painful times and successes helps you to feel confident that that's enough. That's enough information. Let's go this way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the first Lost Entrepreneur podcast. I'm your host, Sebastian Romero. Today we have with us Oscar Zamorano. He was the former Senior Vice President of Global Operation and Supply Chain at iRobot, and currently is the CEO and founder of O. Zamorano Consulting, LLC. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sebastian. Lovely to be here and have this chat with you.
Yeah, thank you. So before we get into what you do right now or before, let's get into kind of like your early life. So were there any hobbies or activities that pointed you in the direction of like a managerial role?
I always wanted to be an engineer, and coming from a family of engineers, and I spent a lot of time just looking at the way how my father conducted his businesses. And I was not aware that he was leading me, but somehow he understood very early that I enjoy just participating in the background. So when he was the president of one of the largest fishing companies in Colombia, I remember going to his office and sitting in the corner and just listening to the phone calls, listening to the meetings. And by doing so, what happens is that you learn the things that you like, and you also identify the things that you don't like.
Yeah.
My father was a very strong personality, and he can lose his temper. And I said, I don't want to be like him. But on the other hand, he was someone that when I walked around the factories, when I interact with the people that work with him, they love him because he was very fair and he treated his employees really well. So in the early life, looking and having the opportunity to have those experiences was very good for me.
In keeping with your role, do you try to follow in your father's footsteps by having that vigor to be beloved by the people you work with in the supply chain and create a productive environment for everyone?
Sebastian, I strongly believe that it is all about the people. If you treat the employees with fairness, but at the same time you are demanding, it really works well. And creating those strong relationships is very important later on in life whenever we have an issue. Like we went through a pandemic.
Yeah.
Companies who had built very strong relationships with their suppliers, with the factories, they really did well. In times of stress and multiple issues, you go back to the relationship. Like, yes, I know that this product is in short supply, but I would like to have a little bit more than what I would have get if I just had a standard relationship. They treated me a little bit better than probably they treated others because there were years and years of investing in a relationship.
Okay, got it. So it's all about those relationships and those bonds that really run the supply chain, especially through hard times.
Yes, because in the end, what is supply chain? And I like to call operations and supply chain, and that was the title that we gave it to that in iRobot. So I did 25 years with the Gillette company. Then I had a short period running all the New Balance shoe factory, and then I went to iRobot for a little bit more than 13 years. But when you think about what supply chain is, I used to define it in the following way. It is like you want to be the peace of mind of the general manager and the sales organization. If a general manager needs to worry about whether the product is going to be on time, it is going to be on quality, the cost is too much, you are diverting the attention of that sales organization and that general manager from what they do best, which is they have to sell. They have to gain market share. They have to expand the distribution of the product. And if they have to worry about product supply, they are wasting their time because they are not going to be good at that. And even though they are going to pretend and they want to help, and once you need help, you are in trouble as a supply chain. So be the peace of mind. This is one thing that people really get fast, and the other one is you need to make sure that the product shows on time, on quality. At the same time, cost gotta be very important. A cost that is really fair, the best possible cost considering the circumstances. And one more that is extremely important. You need to make sure that you have capacity in place for the future expansions.
Okay, got it. During, let's say, the pandemic, as you said, I read something from McKinsey that said a lot of companies were much more likely than expected to increase inventories and much less likely to either diversify supply bases or to implement nearshoring or regionalization strategies. So, do you have to, at that time, completely shift over from I obtain the supplies from my suppliers and then immediately try to at least stash as much as I can in preparation?
I have probably a strong opinion on that. You know, let's go back to the essence of supply chain. It is not about, let's take the example where we are. We are in August of 22. And in most companies that are running supply chains, which is the majority, unless you are doing software or something different, year 22 is done, especially in consumer electronics. Whatever you are going to sell in December is either already in the warehouse, is in transit, or it has been manufactured, or as a minimum you already have the raw materials to manufacture the product. And so there is nothing you can do in 22. We supply chain people, 22 is done. It's done very much in March. 23, in a large portion, is also already done. I mean, you can look at me and say, well, but we are so far away. No, we are not that far away from 23. Even 24, just to make the point, still probably too close. Whatever you are going to sell in the first quarter of 2024 needs to be produced in the last quarter of 2023, and you are already purchasing raw materials. There are many electronic components, especially in products in consumer electronics. Computers, TV screens, robots, printers, coffee makers, anything that consumes electronics. You are already buying 18 months, 12 months in advance. So going back to your question, you have to have what we call dual sourcing in place.
Okay.
So you need to think ahead. A good supply chain, stable supply chain organization is actually thinking on 24 and 25. Do we have the contract manufacturers or the capacity to produce what engineering is developing today? Do we have visibility of the volumes that we are going to sell in 24 and in 25 in such a way that I'm going through the capacity expansion that I need right now?
Yeah.
Do I have knowledge in our factories today to be able to deal with the products that are going to come in the future, that some of them, many of them are going to bring innovations that today we are not familiar with. So we better jumping and trying to learn ahead of that. So when I hear that companies in the middle of a pandemic were trying to do dual sourcing, nearshoring, they were way too late. Everybody running the last minute into Mexico. Everybody running the last minute into Malaysia, or trying to get out of China because of the tariffs. Yes, you can attempt to do all these heroic efforts, but I don't think that they were that successful in order to try to do it in 1 year, 2 years. Um, you need to work ahead of the plan. And in some cases, when you go and do dual sourcing, you are going to end up not only consuming a lot of engineering resources in your company that are important to develop new products, but you need to consume them. But at the same time, you are going to go to locations that are more expensive. And that's a difficult sell for the general managers, where you are saying, you know what? You need dual sourcing. You need business continuity. You report to a board, and a board is not going to be happy with you if you don't have dual sourcing. If you have a fire in a factory and you have a complete shutdown, that's not acceptable. So let's invest, be prepared, spend some additional funds, buy product from a second or a third location well in advance, in such a way that whenever there is a fire, whenever there is a pandemic, whenever there is so many natural, disasters that we have from to be ready when that happens.
So everything's about foresight, trying to look in advance.
Supply chain is about getting ahead of yourself, trying to anticipate the so many things that are going to be wrong. Have dual sources or triple sources for very strategic components. Remember that, let's go back to iRobot. One simple robot has 1,500 individual electronic components. In order to stop making the whole production line, you need to miss only one. That's all you need. So getting anticipation to dual source, being able to have different alternatives if something shuts down, if there is an issue of a factory that is making a lens in somewhere in Korea and they have an issue. Well, I need to have an alternative for that lens that goes in the camera. I need to have an alternative for the battery. I need to have an alternative for the motor. It's all about dual sourcing, business continuity, peace of mind for the general manager.
Got it. And like you said, you have to convince the board and the general manager of where you get your supplies from, or let's say having a second warehouse in case one burns down. Is it hard to be the person that is almost in the future, let's say, to convince these people that are maybe not looking to the company such far ahead, so far?
I would say that we operations and supply chain people, we need to do our work, and we need to get the trust of our leaders. When I retired from iRobot, I was reporting to Colin Angle, who was the CEO and chairman, and there was an incredible amount of trust. When we came up to him ahead of the pandemic, and we presented to him the challenge that we need to get out of China. We need to diversify. And getting out of China at that time was a 15% premium. And Mexico was probably 20% premium. Malaysia was 15% premium. Vietnam was 10% premium along with Indonesia. We said we had to do it. And him and the board and the senior manager of the company, they very much looked at us and they said, put together a proposal in front of us. We put together a proposal. We went and we did an analysis all around these different places. Eastern Europe, Mexico, Southeast Asia. And we made a proposal which was, let's go to Penang in Malaysia. And before the pandemic, it was probably end of 2018. we had a factory already running in Malaysia, which was very helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, a year later, we had a second factory running in Malaysia, and I understand the company is now expanding to another region.
Mm-hmm.
But you gain the trust, you do the work, you deliver, you become the peace of mind of the sales organization. You get the support from finance and senior management to do this type of stuff.
Got it.
Business continuity is very important on any business, regardless it is private or it is a public company.
Got it. So let's say when you moved from Gillette to New Balance, or New Balance to iRobot, is it difficult to gain that trust at the start?
I don't think that was the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge was not for the company. So look at this picture. A company like iRobot was getting someone who was used to run $14 billion in sales.
Yeah.
Was getting someone who was familiar to deal with 15,000 different SKUs. SKUs is different product presentations in 180 countries on 57 warehouses and thousands of employees. This is what they were getting.
Mm-hmm.
But look at me. I was moving from such a large company to a company that was selling $120 million. A company that in 2008, when I arrived, struggled to identify how many units we had in the warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
A company that was extremely successful. I mean, the company was selling like crazy, but at that time we were not making much money. At that time, we didn't have visibility of what we were going to sell in 2 or 3 years. So the challenge was actually for me, and for me to be able to talk in a language. I mean, there were so many things that needed to be done at that time on iRobot. But I was not the only one who was new. There was a new senior guy that was coming from Pepsi Cola.
Yeah.
And so it was a bunch of mature consumer goods companies that were landing into iRobot and become part of this journey that took the company in this short period of time from $100 million to $1.5 billion.
Yeah.
So what we had to do, and we used to get together and chat and exchange the challenges that was to decide what needs to be done today, tomorrow, the following week, because things were on fire.
Yeah.
So yes, you can think that the company was missing an S&OP, but right now the problem was not an S&OP. The problem was to know exactly how many units I have in the warehouse.
Yeah.
The problem was to determine how to communicate to the factories what needs to be produced. The problem was to do certain things that if you don't do it immediately, there is not going to be company in a month. So, and that was fascinating. I mean, that was using all the experience, using all the resources that were available, limited at that time, because the company wasn't making the money, and being able to get all of that together, and then to begin to implement things that I would have loved to have at the beginning. Today at 4:30, I'm going to meet with a guy that we hire, Joe Noguera. I hire him to do supply and demand planning.
Mm-hmm.
And when we hired him, he said, okay, I need some time to learn how you do it. He said, you are going to get that time for free. We are doing nothing. So how do you plan? This is what we have here. We need you to come over here. We have Oracle, but we don't know how to use it.
Okay.
So we have the tool. Do you know Oracle? He said, I have worked with Oracle all my entire life. So do me a favor. The following 2 months, as soon as you get in the company the first day, you shut down in a room Nobody's going to know your name. You are going to move the 40 SKUs that we have, and you are going to put them into Oracle in such a way that we can manage them properly, do the transactions in Oracle, and walk away from all those Excel files that were extremely difficult to manage. And in a few months, he put together everything into Oracle. We watched a huge step in order to begin to get control of what was going on.
And Oracle is a software.
It's a software. It's like SAP. It's a CMI.
And so that guy just bunkered down his best, and
This
he
was another guy with an enormous amount of experience.
yes.
So we hired a guy who was running warehousing for Gillette in Europe, and later on retired running warehousing for Gillette in North America. He came also with me to iRobot, and he came in and he said, "Wow,
What's happening?
what is happening here?" He said, "Welcome, enjoy your time. There is a lot to be done. The critical point is you need to be very thoughtful about what are you going to work on first, because there are so many things that needs to be improved or deployed from scratch. But you need to select very carefully where are you going to spend the time at the beginning, because there are certain things that need to be basic, that needs to be resolved before you jump into the improvement of the things that are going to move us to become a $500 million company, a $1 billion company. Forget about that right now.
Yeah.
Let's survive."
So you'd say that the planning stage of the supply chain is the most important, and that everything stems from there. Do you think that, let's say, like with iRobot, even though you had maybe at the start a shaky plan, once you got there and you created a new plan, is it easy once you have the plan?
Yes, keep in mind that this was a company that was, well, right now is 33 years. So you have a company that start from scratch, from 3 guys in a garage, very smart people, and that had a vision. And the 3 founders, they really believed that robots were going to be the future. But then you have an organization that was sizable for a company of 20 people, that was sizable for a company of 30 people, that was the proper size and management capabilities for a company that was making $5 million in sales. And when the company got into the consumer goods with Roomba, the company grew really fast. Roomba was launched, I believe, in 2014. You can imagine the first year was small, and I arrived in the company, in 2004 actually. I arrived in the company in 2008.
Okay.
Sorry for the misspelling of the date. I arrived in 2008. So it was only 3-4 years since Roomba has been launched. Let's say 500,000 Roombas was an enormous amount.
Yeah.
But this is nothing as compared to what the company is producing today.
Yeah.
So the organization and the people and capabilities and computer aids were dimensioned for that small company. As the company began to have a clear path to become a billion-dollar company, many things had to be done very quickly. What a company takes years to do, we had to do it in a very short period of time, because the company was growing at a time 30+% from a year over year.
Yeah.
So whatever you design for a $400 million company was not good enough for a $600 million company, and very soon was not enough for an $800 million company. So it was fun. I mean, we all had a lot of work. There were many trips to Asia. There were many decisions that were made really fast, but it was a very strong team. We supported each other, and I would say it again. We had a lot of fun.
It's great.
Is it okay if I add a question now?
Yeah, of course.
I was gonna ask. Obviously, you came into the company, right? And you were, I guess, kind of used to at New Balance, like and also Gillette, a lot of support and like kind of the groundwork, right? What was the first thing that you got into iRobot, other than obviously like inventory? That was like, why do you not have this yet? Like, what was that one moment you're like, you don't have that? How have you been doing this?
Just like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well, there are many, right? I mentioned already how come we don't know how many units we have in the warehouse, how many units we have in transit. But I have probably stressed a few times already that it is all about planning. And if you don't have an MRP, if you don't have a system in which you can move the demand plan, and when I say the demand plan is not the next 12 months of demand plan, you need to move 3 years. How can you anticipate what you need to buy today to be able to support the sales? I mean, that was basic. So, they used to make fun of me because at the beginning, and it happened for quite some time, my day was very much spent gaining what I call business intelligence. And business intelligence is having lunch in the cafeteria with the guys that were doing sales, interacting with the guys in engineering that were developing the new products or making modifications to the existing products, interacting with the people in finance, interacting with the people in marketing. Why that? Because since there was not a solid planning, the decision of what to make and how many to make and where to make those products, that decision was very important and needed to be taken by someone, and I was taking those decisions.
Okay.
So place an order for 200,000 units of this SKU. Ask her, this is not in the demand plan. Don't worry. Remember, I am already retired. Which is true. I was already retired from Gillette. I was getting my pension. When I went to iRobot, I am already retired. I can take those decisions. If there is an issue, I can give you an email, I can put it on writing, place an order for that. But what about if they don't sell it? Don't worry, let me deal with that. And there were many instances in which there was a lot of communications at senior management level. We actually, formally, we got together every 3 months, and but as I said before, informally, it was a constant communication. So I remember being in meetings, getting out, getting my phone, and talking to the head of planning, this Joe. I said, Joe, they are going to ship more, and just place an order right now for this, and this, in such a way that when they wake up in China, when we are driving to our houses here in Massachusetts, they have already the orders, and ask them that I need to get a response by the end of the day when they can start shipping the product. Give me a delivery date. So when we were sleeping, they were working. The following day, I already had an answer. I came to the same meeting. It used to take 1 day and a half, 2 days, 2 days and a half. I already had an answer that if you guys want to sell more, we will get the product for you. Really? Yes. Peace of mind. You just tell me what you want to. Now, obviously, we had to evolve into a company that was going to be able to anticipate with much more time in advance what was going to happen. But in the early days was making difficult decisions where I had to remind everyone, I am retired. Don't worry, I take responsibility for that.
So it's really all about creating those connections with not only, say, your suppliers, but really the people inside of your business. And just like, as you said, create that peace of mind and understand where everyone's coming from.
It's all about the relationships with the factories. Remember that in China, big deals and decisions are not made in meetings. They are made having dinner, enjoying a glass of wine, or playing a round of golf on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
We Westerns, we tend to, this is family time. So if I'm going to China, I'm going to fly back on Friday because I want to spend the weekend with my family.
Yeah.
No, that Saturday and Sunday was very important to socialize, to build and strengthen those relationships,
Yeah.
and go and play golf with them at 120, 110 degrees Fahrenheit, 99% humidity, because it was not a round of golf. It was having the breakfast with the owner of the factory, him introducing to us his son that he was growing up,
Mm-hmm.
having, after playing golf, sitting together, have a beer and chatting. He asking me for favors, I asking him for favors, and I'm making those deals that don't need a piece of paper. Just ask her, I am not delivering the numbers. Can you give us 200,000 units more? Don't worry, we will get it for you. I'll let you know in a week. And actually delivering to him the 200,000 units. And me now saying, now he owes me one.
Yeah.
Because that's the way how it works in Asia, right? So, yeah, building and investing on the people and the relationships, very important.
Do you think there are any like day-to-day annoyances that you faced while in iRobot before, after the the mixes?
Well, I mean, people speak too much about the pandemic, but let's assume that it is gone. There will be another one. Hopefully, it's going to be in 80 years, like this one. But when you work in operations and supply chain, there are many things going on, many things that can go wrong. The one that we are scared the most is what we call, the word that we use is class failure. Class failure is, by a simple definition, when you have an endemic quality issue. Let me give you an example. You are producing TVs,
Okay.
and you are using an electronic component that when you do all the testing in your factory and you turn on the TV and you move the channels and you burn in the TV, we call that burn in, for half an hour, the TV is perfect.
Yeah.
And then you realize that TVs that are 1 year old, they begin to fail. But now you have been shipping TVs for a year. And now you begin to TV in Poland and TV in Switzerland, TV in Brazil, and the following day is 10 TVs in another country, and that becomes, this is what we call an endemic quality issue.
Yeah.
Those are very scary. And those supposed to be anticipated by the product design.
Yeah.
But it's not always possible. So, but there are mechanisms to anticipate that. In the case of my previous companies, when I was running Gillette Shanghai, for example, we were making blades. I used to come down and take blades and shave with them. They were passing quality. I wanted to shave with a blade.
Yeah.
In the case of New Balance, people wear the product.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you are not working in New Balance and walking around with Adidas shoes, right? In the case of iRobot, you run the product in your house. You want to see it. And on top of that, in the case of iRobot, we have something that we call test beds.
Mm-hmm.
We run 4 samples from each factory every day, take a sample, we put it in a test bed, and we run the product over 2,000 hours in such a way that we will be the first ones to see if there is a class failure. And let me tell you, this is very helpful because sometimes you get an issue, immediately you ask what is the reference of that robot, let me see the serial number, I know exactly when was made, where was made, and I go to the test beds that we run many months before for product that came from that assembly line that day, and that's not a major issue. That probably is a 1C or 2C. That's not a big deal.
Okay.
But going back to the original question, class failures are very scary, and you need to do everything to avoid those surprises.
Let's say a class failure does get through those tests that you do in the factories. What would be the process to, let's say, recall the TVs?
You have to go through a recall, but it's very painful. When you have a class failure, and let's continue with the example of the TVs, you need to notify the governments that you have a class failure. And then you need to put together and disclose what are the actions that you are going to take. And now you need to communicate to retailers of the world, and you can see on TV people with class failures recalling cars, recalling a Rhode Island company, to avoid the name, is now getting through a class failure I saw on TV on a baby hammock, and those happened. And once you disclose, not only to the government, to the people, it's painful. But at least in consumer electronics, the product fails.
Yeah.
Imagine when that happens for the companies that are making medical equipment. Yeah. Now you are at a different level. So, yes, this is probably one of the things that are more scary when you work in supply chain. Not only because it could happen in your factory, it could happen to a component that you are buying from highly reputable companies, right?
Yeah.
From the best, well-known manufacturers of electronic components. Once in a while, they have issues themselves.
I heard one time I think it was a Samsung phone, and it was like the battery, if you charged it too long, it would blow up.
Yes, those class failures, that one was widely spread, right? Remember the days where you were not allowed to walk in a plane with a Samsung phone?
Yeah.
Oh, let me tell you, that one was painful, very painful. Yeah. I don't want to be in the shoes of that operations and supply chain and quality leader of that company when they were going through that. But at the same time, the way how companies address those major issues is today that company, we don't need to say the name, is selling phones.
Yeah. And
people trust because they step up, they recognize that they had an issue, and they fix the issue.
Yeah. It's all about how you rebound from what happens.
Yes.
Yeah, what I found really funny was how fast they made the 8th after the 7th. They just recall, and then next month it's like, the new one's coming out.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you have to recover.
Yeah. Yeah, because you couldn't give him the same phone back.
No, definitely not.
Do you think it's more difficult to maintain your supply chain than it is, let's say, creating a whole new one?
I think that you build your supply chain over time. Um, yes, I think that would be the answer. You build it, you make it stronger, you hire and upgrade your capability.
Yeah.
Because you are upgrading software, you are upgrading tools, you are implementing KPIs. As you can imagine, in a company like Gillette, I could press a key and find out exactly what was produced the previous hour. I could know exactly where the containers were and what was inside every single container. All that data exists. Do they exist on my screen? Not for companies that are not as structured, as developed as the big ones, but over time, when you become a $2-3 billion company, is very different than $1 billion company, than a $500 million company, than a $100 million company, because you have to grow. You are dealing with bigger numbers, and the supply chain has to evolve.
Got it. So as your company evolves, your company changes, you have to evolve with it. It's never really done.
Never. And it's never done growing, because sometimes actually you need to adjust backwards. I mean, sometimes the company has an adjustment.
Yeah.
I mean, without mentioning names, but there are so many companies that they were doing fantastic a year ago during the pandemic, and there has been a contraction. Yeah. So once you have a contraction, you also have to do the contraction in your organization.
Yeah, so you're not wasting money.
Yes, and that's difficult. That's another one. We mentioned class failures.
Yeah. Shrinking,
adapting a company to a smaller footprint because there has been a contraction on the revenue.
Mm-hmm.
That also is very painful.
When you're like going through just like your daily routine, what do you think is something that could make you more productive to your day to day?
Something that me as a baby boomer and someone who worked intensively with my personal strategy before the pandemic is communication.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of data that I used to collect by just going to get a coffee, by walking to the cafeteria, by sitting at random with someone who is working in finance, working in marketing. I mean, getting a pulse of what is going on in the company, getting really good understanding of business intelligence, not only within the company, because in the end, who are we as a managers? Mm-hmm. We are decision makers. I mean, it has been a long time since I have not moved a box. Except in this house that we are now packing. But it has been a long time that I have not really worked in a warehouse or schedule tracks for logistics or do planning, which was my first job, or being a supervisor in a factory, which is actually work that it is all about decision making. Mm-hmm. And the best decision makers are the ones that actually have plenty of information to make the best decision with the amount of data that you have at the time. Yeah. Because there is another thing that I need to add to that. Making decisions with 100% information, computer can do that. Yeah. They don't need me. 100% they don't need me. Making decisions with 60% of the data that is required to make that decision, this is where experience, a lot of failures, a lot of painful times and successes helps you to feel confident that that's enough. That's enough information. Let's go this way. And that requires everything else that I mentioned before. And, 40 years and knowing the right people, making the right phone calls, trusting the right people. This is the difficult part. And trusting yourself on those decisions without being cocky, right?
Yeah.
Yes, without being cocky. Humble, we are going to make the decision, and we are going to make mistakes. And in iRobot, as in Gillette, as in New Balance, making mistakes was perfectly acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Screw up, big time. I remember a time where I had to call my boss. He gave me $3 million to resolve a big issue.
Yeah.
Big issue. And I called him on Monday, and I said, sorry, I spent 4.
Yeah.
And I didn't have time to call you to double check. We had to negotiate a factory that stopped because they were losing money. We had to make some very quick negotiations and give them some bonuses to recover the production that we lost. And those were decisions that were made on the spot, and it wasn't my money, but I knew that I had my manager's back.
Mm-hmm.
And when I called him, I said, I spent much more than what you told me, but and that year we exceeded despite the money that I spent fixing a shutdown.
Yeah. Do you think, let's say, someone that believes they are, let's say, the best or too cocky, do you think that those decisions, if they happen too often, could severely, let's say, hurt their career?
Definitely. I mean, it's peace of mind, and things need to run smoothly. I mean, if you are driving to Chicago and every half an hour you have a puncture, and I mean, there is a moment that you say, come on, I mean, let's change the car.
Yeah.
Let's get a different driver. I mean, we have already changed tires 7 times.
Yeah.
And I am not sure anymore that I'm going to make it on time to Chicago. So, yes, companies are forgiving, and they understand that errors needs to be made, because otherwise people will check every single dot, and companies don't have the time, the resources to do that, right? They need to take advantage of the experience of the executives and managers and people in general, and they accept certain amount of failure, but in general you need to move in the right direction efficiently.
Yeah. Do you think that let's say you are maybe one of the most how do I say this? Experienced, and you also have the most knowledge about a topic, but as a supply chain manager, but you don't, do you want always act like the smartest person in the room, or never?
People in general that work in supply chain and operations are very capable, and because it's a career you build over time. So a typical person that is leading an organization like I was has to know manufacturing, quality, demand, supply, S&OP, warehousing, distribution, procurement, strategic sourcing, strategic planning. You have to have at one time in your life, because how can you talk about warehousing and logistics if you have never spent any time in warehousing and logistics? I mean, how can you determine the future of a factory if you never spend a minute in a night shift in a factory where you know that the efficiency is not the same when everybody is? How can you make quality control decisions if you have never had the opportunity to run that organization and understand the strength of the data and the challenges and I keep going on, right? Supply, demand. Understand that, yeah, demand 50% forecast accuracy should be good enough. If your supply chain cannot manage that level of uncertainty, they're going to look for someone else who can deal with that. Because forecast accuracies of 70-80%, companies like Gillette and probably Procter and Gamble and some of those that are so embedded into the retailers, probably they can achieve. Companies like ours, 50% was, thanks God, this is awesome, because we used to work with zero. Zero was very common not too long ago.
Do you think supply chain is like, I guess one of those thankless jobs? Because I feel like if you do it really well, everything runs smoothly, and everyone's like, you don't do anything.
100%. 100% agree with you. Supply chain is one of those jobs that if you have supply making the product available, cost, quality, and you have a good grip on your scalability, right? How are you going to scale and expand for the new products? You can pass easily under the radar screen, because why do I need to talk to those guys if we usually have the product available in the warehouse? and even more, why do I need to understand what they do to make that happen when things just happen? So just let them do that. As I said, you don't worry. Roombas grow on trees. That's all you need to worry. Just give me the water, they grow on trees. You don't need to worry about how they are made, how they are shipped. This is our problem. It's too much details. You go and focus on so many other things that needs to be done in a company. But within supply chain, there is one that is even worse than that. Quality. You only know the name of the quality leader when there is an issue. Quality leader can go for years without being recognized, because if there is not an issue, why do you need to know him, right? Or her, or know them? That one is, I was a quality manager in Gillette, a director, for 2 years, and I had, as a result of that experience, an enormous appreciation for the people working in quality, because if you do an awesome job, nobody knows that you exist. It's an extreme comment, right? But as we said, supply chain, someone in supply chain that doesn't come often is when the quality guy is doing an awesome job.
So your job, the best you can do is not to get noticed.
Is not to get noticed. Absolutely. That's an awesome job in quality, in product quality.
Alright, well, thank you so much.
Anytime.
Yeah,
I love to do
great.
this and share and mentor people, and that has been an awesome interview.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been a great, insightful talk. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you.